I didn't think it was possible that Mob Psycho 100, a series that's known for its over-the-top action and absolute hilarity, would actually give me the feels. Hello my friends, it's time for another psychic adventure with Mob Psycho 100 Season 2. Before I go further into my review, it's time to give a shameless plug into a video that I just got done working on, my review of Dragon Ball Super Broly, the latest Dragon Ball movie. It is incredibly awesome and I had a blast making that review. I worked really hard on it, so I'd really appreciate it if you guys could check it out, give it a like, and maybe share it with some of your friends. There will be a link for that video in the description box below, but let's go ahead and jump into this episode right here. Another episode which is wholly dedicated to Reigen Arataka, everybody's favorite greasy con artist. And this episode right here ended in a way that I honestly didn't expect. It actually made me feel something. You know, I was already feeling kind of sorry for Reigen in the last episode, but this one right here just absolutely punched me in the gut. In the final moment of the episode, and I'm going to go ahead and just say spoiler warning right here, because at the very end, Reigen and Mob actually make up with one another and they become friends again. But it didn't go the way that I was actually expecting. In fact, most of this episode had me convinced that Reigen was actually going to somehow bullshit his way out of another situation. It's something that he's always been really good at, but actually, he ends up getting completely humiliated, and this really hurts because after the last episode, he went into a really dark place where he was abandoned by Mob. This is when he had to pick himself up off the ground, rebuild himself as a brand new, reformed man, and everything seems like it was going really good for him. He was getting more business, his customers were super happy, he was on a radio show, and now he was getting ready to go on national television in Japan. He was about to make a big name for himself. The problem is, this entire program was basically built to show that he's actually a fraud psychic. It didn't help either that Jodo Kirin, a character who absolutely hates Reigen, was doing everything in his power to make him look bad. But this entire program, like I said, was just sort of designed to show that Reigen was a complete and total con artist. And of course, it ended up biting him in the ass. The entire point of this program is that they were going to have this kid come out who had been possessed by some sort of demon, and they were going to do a live on-air exorcism. And initially, Reigen was just thinking he was going to be there to make a couple comments, ask a few questions, and promote his business. He didn't realize that he was going to be the one who was doing the exorcism, and this was all perfectly planned by Jodo Kirin, a character who made a previous appearance when Mob and Reigen and them went up to that mansion to help out that real girl who was actually being possessed by a super powerful psychic demon. And it was during that episode where Jodo was kneed directly in the stomach by Reigen that he decided that he was going to do everything in his power to get revenge on this guy. And he actually ends up manipulating the TV crew into making Reigen actually perform this exorcism, which he painfully has to force himself through, utilizing all of his bullshit techniques of throwing salt in people's faces, doing all this like weird massage technique, and of course, none of it works. At first, it seems like it's fully convinced that this kid is possessed by some sort of demon. It's not revealed until after 30 minutes of doing all this crap that this kid is actually a child actor, and they've just been fucking with Reigen the entire time, which of course makes him look completely bad in front of everyone, and leads to one of the best Beethoven punchlines that I've ever seen in anything, period. So just as Reigen was on top of the world, suddenly he's back at the bottom again. Everybody is out for him. The media, everybody online, even former colleagues of him don't seem to trust him anymore. What's even more sad is he even returns back to that bar with all those sad motherfuckers who completely just dismiss him at this point and don't even consider him a friend anymore, realizing that they were basically easy prey for his con artist game. It's a sad moment for him, and you really want to see him come out on top by the end of the episode. It's not until he returns back to his home, which has been bombarded by paparazzi, that he decides to hold a press conference the next day to reveal everything. And this is when the episode gets pretty damn interesting. The press conference scene of this episode is just so damn good, especially because it looks like Reigen is going to initially come clean. He even gets help from his mother, who seems to constantly undercut him at every single opportunity that she has to have a speech, which is going to somehow get him out of this situation. but he decides to be very passive-aggressive with the way that he actually addresses the press and all of their questions, basically saying no comment to a lot of their questions, and even sort of changing the subject oh so subtly to the point where he actually starts to convince them of the fact that maybe he is a psychic. Maybe he actually does have some powers. There's no way that he can actually convince anyone here, but at least he's not going to look like a complete and total liar. But this all ultimately leads up to a scene where Reigen realizes his faults and learns why he got into this business in the first place. Initially, it's just because he was bored with his day job and he just sort of bought this office on a whim. There was nothing really lucrative about it, but he was doing something that he found kind of interesting, and in what seemed like he was getting ready to quit this for the very first time, that's when he actually met Mob, a young kid who could turn to no one about his psychic powers. This is when Reigen realizes the only reason he even keeps this business is all because of Mob in the first place. He came to him, he revealed his powers, and he saw a lot of potential in him. However, he actually tried to rein in that potential. He tried to cage it and keep it for himself, and this is when he actually apologizes to him on the air with everyone watching, including Mob himself, who miraculously is able to use his psychic powers all the way to where they're doing this press conference and starts to make all of this shit just start flying around in the air, which not only freaks out everybody at the press conference, but also convinces them that maybe Reigen actually does have some psychic power. But it's the final scene of the episode that really got me, when Reigen is walking home, and of course he ends up running into Mob. And what I thought was going to be a really, downer of a scene, they were going to turn into a joke, they actually did something kind of heartfelt. Mob actually tells Reigen the truth, that all along he actually knew who he was, and I was fully convinced that he was going to say he was a fraud psychic. Instead, Mob referred to him as a very kind and good person. This was a powerful moment for the series, as Mob doesn't see Reigen as a con artist, as someone who's simply just using his powers. He sees him as a person who actually cares about him, and was actually the only person to stick his neck out for him and to actually realize that he has these crazy powers. He could talk to no one else about this, but Reigen was willing to hear everything. He was not just a master or an employer, he was a true friend to Mob. The fact of the matter is, these characters work as a duo, and I'm glad to finally see them all back. Hell, I'm even glad to see Dimple again, too. And I really hope that things are going to be getting back to normal in the next episode of the series, now that Reigen has sort of proved yet again that he's a legitimate psychic, and let me just, air quote that again. He's a legitimate psychic. But now that Mob is back and they have a newfound respect for one another, I can't wait to see where the story is going to go from here. If the intro is any indication, hopefully we'll get to see the return of Claw in a much bigger, crazier storyline for the series. I hope that's the direction it's going to go in, but even if it doesn't, even if we just continue to get Monster of the Week style storytelling, my ass is going to be in that seat watching every week, because the series has really great humor, but a surprising amount of heart. That's what this episode was all about. So what's the rundown on this episode of Mob Psycho 100? That Beethoven joke. That's what it's all about right there, when Jodo Kirin actually called out Reigen during that moment. It was such a great moment because it's just like in any other comedy series where someone is fumbling and they're trying to come up with some sort of answer, desperately looking around the room for anything that could give them some sort of response. And the only thing that Reigen sees is this dude wearing a Beethoven shirt, and he says that Beethoven's ghost was the one that was inhabiting this kid, to which Jodo Kirin just does the da-da-da-da. I'm not kidding, the moment actually had me in stitches. In fact, the entire moment with him on the TV show was really cringy to watch, but I have to say it was really damn funny, with how incredibly wild and animated the host of the TV show was, and the ridiculous things that Reigen was trying to do as he was trying to convince everyone that he was a real psychic. It was also hard to watch as he was just dive-bombing so hard. I felt so bad for his character while watching this entire episode, especially because he, like I said, sort of recovered in the last one and looked like he was back on top, for all of it just to be taken away by a stupid, vindictive old man. But ultimately, this episode is all about Reigen and Mob patching up their friendship and doing it in the best way possible, especially with Mob actually recognizing that Reigen is a human with feelings, and he's a good guy. He genuinely wanted to help out Mob when he was a young kid, and of course, Mob effectively basically became responsible for his business getting taken off the ground. Also, this episode had some not-so-subtle commentary on the fact that there is a tremendous amount of outrage culture in the world. I mean, let's face it, every single day you go on social media and people are pissed off about everything. They're constantly offended. They always have to find something to get mad about. It's recreational outrage, and people get off on it, and frankly, it's one of the most toxic things in the world, and it's one of the few things that I really do not like about internet culture. People have no evidence about anything, but if they even hear any sort of evil or bad accusation, they're immediately going to start demonizing people. And as Reigen said, there's really no way to prove that if he's a real psychic or not. I loved that moment during the press conference scene as he was able to talk his way out of this situation, but it also came to the realization of what his relationship with Mob was truly like and how he eventually drove him away. He was able to recover from this, and thus he gained his friend back. It was a really powerful moment and something that I didn't expect to see from the series, which is mostly built upon the foundation of comedy. That's not to say that this episode wasn't funny. It was absolutely hilarious, kind of like watching a train wreck in slow motion, which is why I loved it, but I'm glad that it all wrapped up with at least something kind of nice. Overall, I really loved this episode, and I have to say that these two episodes are definitely the most development that Reigen has actually gotten throughout the entire series, and I think it's a long time coming. It's made me appreciate his character, not for the fact that he's just a funny, goofy guy, but that overall, he's just a really cool dude. So, I'm gonna give this episode right here a solid 5 out of 5. Pure entertainment value across the board, and I highly recommend it if you've been following the series. If any of you did watch the episode, I'd love to get your thoughts about it in the comment section below. If you had any favorite moments, funny moments, cringy moments, what did you think about the journey of Reigen and Mob in this episode, and what do you hope to see from the rest of the season? Let's get a discussion going. Comment section below, and like I said, make sure to check out my review of Dragon Ball Super Broly. There will be a link for that in the description box below. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.